Design shapes the way you live. I'm Nico, an interior design expert focused on the connection between home and well-being. Using science, design, and professional expertise, I'll help you shape a space that elevates your mindset and enhances your well-being. Let's create space for better living, starting now. Welcome back to Your Home by Design. Today's episode might sound a little different because I recorded it while walking on a forest trail. So if you hear birds, wind, or the sound of water, that's why. But honestly, it felt right to talk about this topic in nature because we're diving into something we so often overlook: stagnation at home. I'm unpacking how we habituate to our surroundings, how we stop noticing things that impact our energy, clarity, and motivation, and what to do about it. Even beautiful homes can go a little stale, but with some small intentional shifts, you can wake up your space and in turn, wake up your life. Okay, so right now, I am on holidays and I am recording as I walk down a lovely path by a stream. It's so nice and cool where I am, and yeah, I'm visiting family in a small little town. It's a little farming town. It is so lovely to visit them here, but I had to get an episode out, and I just thought, what a beautiful way to record an episode, just walking down a path under some beautiful trees beside a little stream. So if you can hear the water babbling, if you can hear the wind blowing, or if you can hear my footsteps, that is why. I find it interesting that today's episode, I'm going to be touching on what a home feels when it's stagnant. So, and I'm sitting next to moving water. So have you ever looked around your home and thought, ugh, like it's fine. Everything looks just fine. And when you really look, you're like, yeah, it's fine, but it looks tired. There's things in random places. Maybe there's a vase on your table that was full of beautiful flowers that have died, and now it's just a vase that you walk past every day and you haven't thought to change your flowers up or just throw them away and wash out the vase. You're not alone. You stop interacting with your space. You stop really noticing it. And that's not bad. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. And that's why it is so important when this happens to do a little edit and to really pay attention to your environment, to evaluate it and edit it so that things don't become stagnant for too long. And really what happens here is that when we stop interacting with our spaces, we do what's called habituate, and we habituate to our environments. So the spark kind of dulls. And when this shows up, how would you notice? How's some ways that you're responding to your environment you may not notice until you start paying attention. You might find that it shows up because you feel uninspired. You might feel restless or just detached from your home, almost like you don't really care anymore. And often when it happens, it becomes background noise. You stop seeing it. It's almost like years ago, I lived in a city and I first moved into this apartment. It was this amazing little apartment in such a great area. If you're familiar at all with Vancouver, I lived in a place called the West End, and I lived on the 10th floor. And I remember when I first moved into that apartment, it backed onto an alley. It was in a little busier spot than where I had moved from. So I just remember the first few nights lying there and thinking, oh my gosh, what is that noise? Or what's this noise? Or what was that? Is somebody in the alley? You'd hear the guy yelling in the alley. You'd hear the garbage trucks early in the morning. You'd hear just all of the random things going on in the city at night. And I remember after several weeks, all of a sudden, I stopped hearing it. I stopped noticing it. My focus shifted. It didn't wake me up anymore. It almost faded into the background. And this happens all the time in our homes when things are on our to-do list and we're putting them off. when our home isn't visually or aesthetically interesting or inspiring to us. It can be simply just not having the proper place for things. And then it just starts disappearing. We start just getting used to it, when what we need to do is really recognize how our home needs to function, how it needs to look in order to help us thrive in our day-to-day lives. Habituation can be affecting you negatively because it may be diminishing your responsiveness to your environment. It may be stopping you from seeing important information. The state of our homes tell us a lot about where we're at in our life, about how we feel, whether we're motivated, what we're interested in. So if habituation is affecting you negatively, it's going to diminish that important information. So we can use our homes and gather information from our homes to inform what we need to change in order to help us where we want to get better or thrive in our lives. And if you're experiencing this, it's not that it's personal failure, like, oh no, I'm not noticing stuff anymore. What's going on? It's got nothing to do with that. It's actually really normal. It's biological. We all go through that. When there's information overload, our brains will stop focusing in on certain things. Even the best designed homes need a little wake-up call every once in a while to sort of reignite the purpose of the design, to reignite your feelings of enjoyment in your home, and to just get you motivated or keep you motivated. And that can be everything from your cleaning schedule to getting rid of things, to reorganizing, or to really, really effectively evaluate the design of your spaces, the layout of your spaces, the aesthetics, the colors, the lights, all of the things that are affecting you. If you're at a point where it just feels you've normalized everything and nothing stands out to you anymore. Recently, I remember getting home and seeing a pile of things at the front door, and then thinking to myself, that little pile of things has been sitting at my front door for over a week. And today I happened to notice it. Yet I knew, when I stopped and thought about it, I knew how long it had been there. And so it wasn't that I consciously was seeing it and choosing to ignore it. It was that I didn't see it anymore, yet my subconscious was seeing it. I was paying attention. I was noticing. It just wasn't at the forefront of my mind. So it was taking up visual space in my mind as I was coming through the door, but it just receded into the background. And so in that moment, saying, okay, that pile needs to be moved. Things need to be reorganized. And then you get to look at it and say, why was that sitting there for so long? Is it something that actually has a home, or is it something that doesn't? Was it just a quick, I'm going to throw it down there and now I need to rethink where a few things live or how things are designed? And that's just a very small example. So when we talk about stagnation, right, our homes feeling stagnant, when we are habituating things, what does that look like? Well, when we think stagnation refers to a state of inactivity. It actually refers to lack of growth and development, lack of flow, and movement. And so when we look at our homes, what could be affected when things are stagnant? Well, our airflow, our cleanliness, looking at home improvements and being able to evaluate what's really needed, feeling a sense of control over our homes, because having liberty in our spaces and having control over how they are set up and how they look is very, very important. Just having a sense of pride in our home. If you've got people that drop by all of a sudden and you're too embarrassed to answer the door, that can be an indication. Just simply connecting through our aesthetic experience in our home. So what sort of stories are we highlighting? Are we noticing the stories? And then things like color and your lighting, that can all be affected. When we talk about lighting, it could be as simple as you're used to a bulb being out in one of your light fixtures, and then that's affecting how well you see in the evening in your living room. And you may not, again, it may not be a conscious thought, but your body is responding to your aesthetic experience. It is noticing or even straining to be able to see properly at night. And that's just a simple thing, changing a light bulb and making sure that you've got adequate lighting at night. And all of these things are sort of the opposite of really being able to carve out beautiful spaces. Because even when you have a beautiful, beautiful space, even when you have a beautiful home, you can still get into this state where things start to feel a little stagnant. Things start to be put in the wrong spots. It's sort of like, have you ever been into a house where I'm sure when the person that moved into that home, it may have been fairly organized and things had a place and maybe things looked nice. And then over time, it starts to just like pile up. I love the example of like bathroom drawers. When you open up a bathroom drawer, it's just like a catch-all for everything. And you're like, what is going on in here? Like, what is the intention of this drawer? What is the point of everything in here? And I think that that's a bit of a metaphor for what can happen in our homes, right? Oftentimes the excitement's there, even if you do a refresh or if you do a renovation, you're highly motivated when you first move in. You're very inspired. It's a beautiful room that you get to enjoy, or a beautiful house. And then over time, you just start getting used to it. Maybe you don't clean it as much. Maybe you don't go through things as much. You're not evaluating your spaces as much. Therefore, they're not informing what they need to be, because over time, our needs change. So this process and this having the ability to continually look at your spaces and ask yourself, like, does this room feel stagnant? Am I habituating my experience in the room? Are things just going unnoticed? I'm not seeing things. I don't have the pride. I've got those dead flowers sitting in a vase. And you have to ask yourself, how does changing my environment impact your health? When you actually tackle the things that are, that are receding in the background, that need to be looked after, when you're actually changing the light bulbs regularly, when you're looking at your furniture layout and you're asking, is this the right layout for my needs? What's the state of the furniture in your rooms? How long have you had them? When was the last time you cleaned them? All of those things. How's the lighting? Have I changed how I use this room now? Is it more of an office? And now I need to look at changing it to be more beneficial to how I need to see when I'm working. All of these things impact your health, and so very often they can disappear into the background. They can be forgotten, and you kind of get to that, meh, my room feels, it's all right. It's fine. It's fine. But if you were to really break it down, is there a list that you have for that room, or that you had, that you wanted to do, that now you're not going to bother with, or you haven't thought about it for ages? Because when we think about it, if our spaces are feeling stagnant, if they're not being updated, if they're not being cleaned, if they're not being evaluated regularly, then how is that affecting your life? Because stagnation in our environment can lead to stagnation in your life. If you're getting home from a really busy day and you walk in the house and the functions aren't there, you haven't designed your spaces to help you feel inspired, to help you feel motivated, to bring you joy, to connect to your stories, to have adequate lighting for your circadian rhythms, to connect with nature, all of these things. If you haven't designed your spaces with these sort of tools in mind, then it can be causing stagnation in your life. Maybe you're not feeling inspired. Maybe you don't wake up feeling rested. Maybe as you move through your day, you feel a sense of disorganization or just mental chaos. A lot of times, because we live such busy lives and we're always on the go, our homes really need to be a place of rest.
And we need to make sure we're designating our spaces to be able to do that and to affect our health and our well-being in the best possible way. And our homes are directly connected to that. They can be a refuge, they can be a place of rest, they can be a place that causes you to want to wake up in the morning and do that 6 a.m. workout. So make sure that you're looking at your home as a tool and not just a space to make beautiful to impress whoever, or just a space to just allow to become tired as the years pass on. We don't want our home to feel tired as the years pass on, and we certainly don't want ourselves to feel tired as the years pass on, right? And our homes do affect us, and I think every so often it can come down to just a quick fix. And that's maybe all you need. Other times you might have to think through some pretty big updates and how, what are some big things that you may need to do. So I would say just a couple things that you could try that might help is just rearrange your a space. Look at your furniture layout and then tweak it, because oftentimes I always find it so amazing when you do a little change, when you do a little reorganization and evaluation of your home, and then you do make a change, and that can be just a small little change. It's amazing how all of a sudden you experience that room differently. And I've talked about this before. You walk into that room and you just see it slightly differently, because now when you walk into that room, your focus shifts to something that's new, right? The way that our attention works is we shift to things that are salient. Saliency is a really important thing. That's where our attention shifts. We notice something that's new. We notice something that's different. So when you do that little shift, it can really help to bring that sense of fulfillment and pride back into your space. And then just to restyle. I love, like, vignettes are such a beautiful way to add style and interest into your space, to tell a story, because often vignettes are made up of art, sculptures, photographs, flowers. You can do a beautiful vignette with just a collection of really, really meaningful things. Another thing is to add something sort of multi-sensory. So start to think about where you can add some texture, where you can add scent, natural scent with like essential oils or whatever. There's different scents that, energize us or calm us down. Lavender obviously is one that is very calming, but just to start looking at your environment as like a way to add texture, scent, and sound. Sound can be very calming. I know right now for me, as I'm walking down this little path, the babbling brook is beside me, and maybe you can hear it, but that is so relaxing. Introducing sound is very, very important. And then the other thing is to always look at your lighting, right? To shift your lighting, because lighting has such an amazing impact on us, and doing different colored bulbs. And I've talked about this several times before if you've listened to some of my previous episodes, but lighting is really important. It sets a great mood and ambiance for the space. If you're wanting it to really affect your circadian rhythms, I know for myself, I love using the right types of bulbs before I go to bed. Spectrally optimized bulbs are what you'd want to look for. And there's some companies out there that do great spectrally optimized bulbs. They work with your circadian rhythms. So those are going to have the biggest impact on, getting you in the mood for sleep or relaxation and all of those things. But just color as well, it will help to kind of give you the mood and the ambiance. There might not be as much or any sort of biological reaction to that, but certainly it will help to relax you and help set the mood, as I mentioned. And then, as I said before, like, just rearrange your seating to create new conversation paths. It's amazing how, especially if you have guests, if you just rearrange your seating, it just changes up your vista. What are you looking out the window at? Where are you, what doorway or what hallway do you get to look down now, because you've simply reorientated where your seating is? When people come into your home, what are they seeing? There's amazing little tweaks that can be done that just shifts the environment enough to allow you to see it differently and experience and interact with it differently, to make things feel fresh, and for you to be able to then properly evaluate your home to see whether it's working for you in the ways that you need it to, and to make sure that it doesn't become stagnant for too long, because that can happen. It can go on and on of just feeling stagnant and feeling meh and feeling fine. And then, but like I mentioned, even in my home, it's almost impossible for things to not go stagnant at times unless you're always on top of every little thing within your home. But our homes are lived in and they unfold as we do. And that's really important. But it is also important to make sure you are looking at your home as a tool and getting it back to where it needs to be in order for you to be able to thrive and evaluate your spaces to create the most beautiful but beneficial home you can. When you think about, for a second, let's just talk about what you think about when you walk in to a space that's been tweaked. When you've spent a little time just evaluating a room and tweaking it, maybe you've changed the layout, or maybe you've just simply given it a really deep clean and you've reorganized and you walk into that room. How do you feel? How do you feel when you walk into that room? Picture that room for a second. Picture when you've done that. Maybe you've gone to the store and you've bought a few things, just a few little things, which has given you this inspiration to change a few things up. And you do. And then how are you experiencing that space after? Does it allow you to evaluate that space and say, ooh, I like how that looks, but what if now I add this, or I add that, or that piece of art that I just got, I love it so much. What if I changed my wall color to pull that beautiful color that's in that piece of art? Or it could simply be that you've just done a deep clean and you walk into that room and the air feels fresh. You've got some fresh flowers in one of your favorite vases. You've put some music on. You've opened up your window and the breeze is coming in. How are you experiencing that space? How does that change your experience at home? Do you find that you feel a little more organized? Do you find that you slow down a little bit as you move through your spaces? If you've got kids, do you find you feel a little bit more in control? Like, yes, I can plan our day. Here's your whatever prepared and ready to go for you because I feel so good. These are the ways that our spaces impact us. And if you really think about it, I'm sure your space, when you've taken the time to change it up, bring it away from feeling stagnant and meh, right? I'm sure it feels amazing. And I would always say, as you're looking at this, where are the points of contention? What is bothering you right now? What do you think has caused you to kind of overlook certain things? Is it just because you're busy and you just haven't had a chance to, and because of that, you're just rushing through and things are kind of going everywhere, and what's causing it? Or is it because the design just is not right? Because that can happen. And I think often people look at their homes and they think, well, I'm just disorganized. Things just aren't put away properly. I'm just not organized. When really, it could be that the design isn't right. It would be like if you were a chef. Let's say for a second here you're a chef and you are an amazing cook. You're an amazing chef. And you have this kitchen that you use every single day to cook all of your most amazing meals. And the kitchen's tiny. There's barely any counter space. And there's very few drawers. And there's, say, 2 cupboards where your pots and pans go. And you have to cook each and every day. Do you feel efficient in that kitchen? Do you feel inspired in that kitchen? Maybe you have to come up with some really cheap and cheerful, creative ways to make it feel a little more enjoyable. But chances are, you probably get to the point, depending on how long it's been, where you forget what it feels like to be really efficient. You forget that it's actually not you. It's the size of the drawers. It's the lack of storage. And so it's these times where we have to look at our spaces and say, how can I make it more efficient? If you can do a reno, or if you really need to do a reno, if you're a chef, as I just mentioned, if you're a chef, chances are you might need to do a renovation at some point, and it might just be that you start saving for it, or you start planning for it, because it's a long process of planning and getting it right. But you recognize that this is really impacting how you like to spend your time. Or you just simply have to evaluate, say you can't do a renovation, but there's ways that you can really, really organize the space differently. Maybe you have to get rid of a few pots that you don't really use as much, or you have to just think of some things that you can add: wall shelving, or pot hangers, or but even drawer organizers. You don't have to stack things. You can actually purchase proper drawer organizers that are going to help you when you put things away, make it feel really efficient, and I'm sure save you time and frustration, which adds so much to just the joy and the fulfillment of being in that space and doing what you love to do in that room. So I want to ask you, when you think about your home, when you think about certain rooms within your home, do you feel like your home helps you become better? Do you feel like it helps you stay organized? Do you feel like it helps you sleep better, stay focused on task? Do you feel like it helps with your organization and your life in general? Like, do you get that sense that your home is really actually adding to your life and helping you? If there's certain areas of your life where you feel you want to improve, do you think your home is helping you do that? Or do you think it's doing the opposite? Just take a second and just think about that. Think about a room in your home and think about how you use that room and what you'd like to do in that room. And ask yourself, is it helping me do that? Is it supporting me in ways that I need it to in order to and I just want to mention again, like, sometimes we do think we need a really, really big change. I think often, I talk to people and they think, oh, I need to do an overhaul. I need to move. I need to do a complete reno. I need this. I need that. And that's not always the case. Sometimes a small yet very intentional shift is all we need. But we need to make room for observation. We need to effectively observe our spaces, especially when we've let them go for too long and we stop noticing that things need to change. When you think about your space, are there any areas that you're not paying attention to anymore? Things that need to be done that you're just not really focusing on? If you were to stop and really think about it and really pay attention, it would probably bother you a little bit. And it's not that you're not actually, like, your brain is noticing. We notice all of the details, whether they're on the forefront of our minds or not. It can become visual noise and visual clutter, if you will, and our brains pick up on all of it. It's not that your mental to-do list isn't there because you're not noticing it. It is, in fact, still there. You're just habituating your environment. So as I close the episode today, and I'm sorry, I've been walking, I've been pacing. I'm sorry if I'm a little out of breath or if you can hear my feet on the trail throughout the episode. But I just wanted to say, where I stand right now, I'm looking through this little opening beside the brook, and I can see this beautiful field in front of me. And the brook is flowing. There's movement to the water. But as I walked, there was parts of the water that weren't moving, they weren't flowing, and they were just sitting still. And they looked a little murky, they looked a little unclean, and they just looked like a little lifeless. Some of the trees that are in those parts almost look like they're dying. There's this like sludge on top in a few areas, yet just a little further down, there's movement, there's life, sunlight, all of these things. And it's amazing how when things are flowing, when things are moving, how much more beautiful it looks, how much more tranquil and full of life. You know, right now I can see like some leaves just kind of floating by. And I guess I just want to remind you and encourage you to not let your home become stagnant. Open the windows, let that clean air come in, do a deep clean, evaluate your spaces effectively. You know, make sure that things aren't receding to the background where they're not in focus anymore. We want to be consciously making decisions in our home, not subconsciously noticing things and having that tire us out, wear us down, right? So just make sure that you're evaluating your spaces, that you're effectively looking at the areas of your spaces that are points of contention, that might be dragging you down, and just always think, how can I bring life into my room? How can I bring life into my day? And that can be anything from opening up a drawer and seeing that it has just so far gone. It's been years of just dumping. Take a moment and say, how can I arrange this drawer better? What can I do? What are the little organizational things that I can put in this drawer that's going to save me time, that's going to help me be more effective, that's going to allow me to evaluate what I need and what I don't, and get rid of the things that you don't need, you know, and just to look at your home as a tool. Evaluate your spaces. Always look to try to make them beautiful and alive. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I do hope that the audio was okay and that, yeah, there wasn't too much background noise. But yeah, we will chat with you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you for walking with me, literally and figuratively, through this conversation. If this episode helped you see your home a little differently, I'd love it if you shared it with someone or left a quick review. You can also become a Better Living backer to support the show and receive a thank you email from me, plus a 15% discount on our upcoming Create Space course. As always, you can find free design guides and get on the waitlist for the course at yourParo. Let's keep designing homes that help us thrive inside and. Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the show is to follow along and share it with someone who'd love it too. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become one of our Better Living backers. It's a small monthly contribution that helps keep the show going. And as a thank you, I'll send you a personal note along with a 15% discount for the Create Space course when it launches. You can find the support the show link right in the show notes. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for creating space with me.